Hey, welcome back to Common Knowledge, where I'm looking at some common Magic the Gathering cards, telling you if they're good in Pauper. I'm still sick, as you can probably hear, but I can breathe out of my nose, which is it's a plus. And for whatever reason, I thought the only thing I really want to do is take a look at some Magic the Gathering cards. Also noticing, there's we only get 8 of these things to see on the front of this menu, and 3 of them are avatar cards. 2 of them because they say Ang, and Ang's that double A, but even abandoned attachments too. That's funny. Anyway, let's see if this is a good idea or a bad idea. Let's go to our first card. It is Queen's Bay Soldier. It is 1 and a black for a 2/2 vampire soldier. That's all it does. That is some sick art though. Grizzly bears in black. It's also not very good. Grizzly bears would also. Goodness, this was a bad idea. We're gonna push through though. This gets like a 1.2. 1.1. It's just a grizzly bear. Again, the art's very good though. Frilled Sandwalla is a single green mana for a 1/1 lizard. For 1 and a green, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, but you can activate that only once a turn. It's not terrible. You turn your 1/1 into a 3/3 on turn 2. Okay. You can do that at instant speed, so you could do it against your opponent as well as like a combat trick kind of thing. Yeah, we've seen some root wallas do, or some lizard walla things do some things in the past. I don't think this is all that great, but it's a little better than some of the other ones we've seen. The Madness one is the one that is probably the biggest deal. Well, I guess there was the Basking Brood Scale. Is that really a root wall? I don't think that counts exactly, but that was pretty busted. We'll give this one. I'll give it like a 2.1. I think it's all right. Screeching Silklaw is 1 and a blue for a 1/2 bird. It's got flying, and it's also got Metalcraft. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, if you control 3 or more artifacts, that player mills 4 cards. 4 cards isn't a bad amount of milling. I don't think. The problem is this kind of doesn't go. This doesn't really serve any master, because on one hand, you want this in your artifacts-based deck because it has Metalcraft. That's how you do the do the artifact stuff. But this thing's not an artifact itself, and the artifact decks in Pauper also are not really mill-focused decks. If you're in a mill-focused deck, you're probably not in an artifact kind of theme. You're using the persistent petitioners, which are just advisors, and you're going into that kind of tribal thing, and so you're probably not going in an archetype that needs artifacts as much. And a 1/2 flyer for 2 is okay, I guess, but it's not. Again, it doesn't really fit in either archetype all that well, and therefore it just kind of doesn't have a home. We'll give it a 1.4, I guess, but really nothing special here. Hanger Scrounger is 2 and a red for a 2/1 dwarf pilot. It's got backup 1, so whenever this creature enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If that's another creature, it gains the following ability until end of turn. So what ability does it have? Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Pretty simple stuff. Nothing too crazy. Backup can do some fun stuff sometimes, but the ability that you're giving to a creature with the backup ability isn't all that great. Now it is like a 3 mana 3/2 in some ways, because you could put the +1/+1 counter on this, or it's at least giving you 3/2 worth of stats that you can distribute how you wish, and that's okay, but it's not particularly efficient. And the decks that want to do the discard to draw thing really want to play all those discard 1 to draw 2 cards, and this doesn't do that. So it's not quite gonna be there for anything. I think we can give this 1.5. I guess it's pretty disappointing. Next up is Arrester's Arrester's Admonition. Admonition, is that how you say that? I mean, admonishment. Okay, yeah, sure. It's 2 and a blue for an instant. Return target creature to its owner's hand, but it also has Addendum. If you cast this spell during your main phase, you draw a card. We just didn't we just get a much better one of these in Avatar? We already talked about this, right? Yeah, this is much better in. Well, I guess that one was an instant. This is a sorcery, returns a non-land permanent, and if you controlled it, then you draw a card. So it's a little different. Being an instant, that matters, but it is kind of just an unsummoned for 3 mana more, or for 2 mana more, 3 times the mana, I mean. And that, if you cast unsummoned during your main phase, you get to draw a card. Okay. But does that make it worth 3? It might make it worth 2, but even then, I think we have cards that kind of do this for 2 mana. I'm not thinking of one off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we've got something like this. So this is very overcosted for what you're getting out of it. Let's give this a 1.6 maybe. Next up is Aurora Champion. Man, I'm dying over here. Aurora Champion is 2 and a white. Have we done this one? I swear I've seen this art before. I think we have done this one. So I'll read it real quick and then we'll skip over it. Aurora Champion's 2 and a white for a 3/2 elf warrior. Whenever this creature attacks, if your team controls another warrior, tap target creature. So it would need to be in like a very specific tribal thing. It's not very good. It would get a 1 point something, but I'm pretty sure we've done it before, so we will skip right on to Kithkin Zealot, which is 1 and a white for a 1/3 Kithkin Cleric. When this creature enters, you gain 1 life for each black or red permanent target opponent controls. From Eventide, from the plane of Lorwyn, that's fun. And it's okay. Like, it's a decent body. 2 mana for a 1/3 is all right and can block a good amount of stuff. Gaining life on enter is pretty cool, and that's we've seen stuff do that. The problem the problem is that it's all reliant on what your opponent's playing, and that's rough. I mean, that automatically pretty much puts it in the sideboard of any deck that wants to use this in the first place. But even then, it is very dependent on your opponent having a lot of stuff on the board, and you would prefer them probably not to have that. And I don't think gaining a life for each of those permanents is going to offset how far you are behind. So I don't like this really in any sense. Like, you don't want to play this while you're ahead because your opponent doesn't have that much stuff, but you don't really want to play it behind when you're behind because it doesn't do enough to turn the tables. And so it just kind of sits as a pretty bad card. 1 point. I feel like all these cards have gotten pretty bad scores because they're all pretty bad, honestly. 1.5. Next up is Birchlore Rangers for a single green mana. It's a 1/1 Elf Druid Ranger. You can tap 2 untapped elves you control and add 1 mana of any color. Now, is this in the elf deck? Do elves need this? I think this gets used in elf decks. I'm not an expert on elf decks for sure. I think this one does go in it, though. I don't think you really ever morph this creature because it does have morph for a single green mana. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about this, but I feel like this one is played sometimes to get the extra mana. I think there's enough elf bouncing and stuff like that can untap elves, that tapping a couple of elves and you'll get plenty of them on the board, I imagine, if you're in an elf deck. That tapping a couple of them at instant speed for a mana of any color can come in handy sometimes. So I think this is pretty good. I have not seen an elf list. I don't really like thinking about elves, honestly. It's never been my favorite creature type. A friend of mine in middle school and high school, sorry, had like a casual elf deck when we all just played Magic casually because we didn't know any better, and there wasn't online outlets that we could buy cards and things like that. So you just kind of play with the cards you got and see what happened. But he had an elf deck that he was pretty proud of, and he just put all of his money into trading and buying specific cards for that elf deck. So he had, the Elvish Champion that gave him all land walk, but then he was able to make blue mana at some point because he used, what is it, Mind Bend, something like that. Whatever is able to change a word on a card, one of those instants. And so he would change it from Forest Walk on Elvish Champion to whichever kind of walk he needed for whichever person he was playing against. And he just made elves, You put those Land of War elves out on one, you put out a bunch more elves on turn two, and then there was not much you could do. Or at least not much we could do with the limited cards we had. So I just got very tired of playing elves and playing against elves. So I kind of just put them out of my mind, even though they're an incredibly popular creature type in Magic. And I'm pretty sure this card does good play. I'm going to go ahead, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I'm going to give it a 6.5 because it does seem pretty good. Like it's I guess it's a little bit like a springleaf drum in that way, where or like a gene pollinator, I suppose, is a more modern example. But cards that will make mana by tapping other creatures. This one does make you tap two instead of just tapping one, like a springleaf drum would. But I still think that probably ends up being worth it, considering all the elves and elf creature tokens you make in elf decks. Again, I'd have to look at a list to be sure that this is in here, but I have a gut feeling it is, especially when it's 84 cents like this. If it's touching $1 for a common card is somewhat rare, so I would imagine it probably goes in a deck somewhere. So what did I say, 6.4, 6.5, something like that? I think that seems fair. Let's move on to Unblinking Observer. It's 1 and a blue for a 2/1 homunculus. You can tap it to add blue, but you spend that mana only to pay a disturb cost or cast an instant or sorcery spell. It's a double feature, black and white. I don't know about that. Blue has been getting these more and more lately, where you get mana dorks, but they're more specific mana dorks. I think about like Oaken Siren in Lost Caverns of Ixalan that can tap for artifacts. There was one in Duskmourn that could only tap for enchantments. There have been other ones. There was one in Ether Drift that only taps for artifacts. Tapping for disturb costs, I wouldn't worry too much about disturb. That doesn't come up all that often. But being able to tap for instants and sorcery spells is kind of interesting. 2/1's not a terrible body. The thing I'd really want on this is vigilance, though, right? You want to be able to swing in and then still keep it up to tap it for that extra mana. He's okay. The 1 toughness does mean he's just going to get taken out by lots of little things. And I guess as a blue mana dork, you don't mind paying 2. But, we were just talking about Land of War Elves a lot. You're going to find that you're going to be looking for those mana dorks that only cost 1 if you really want to play that way in Pauper. I think he's better than most of the cards we've seen today. I'll give him a 2, I think. A couple more of these, and then I can not do this anymore. Azorius Locket is 3 mana for an artifact. You can tap for white or blue, or you can pay Azorius Hybrid, Azorius Hybrid, Azorius Hybrid, Azorius Hybrid, and tap it and sack it to draw 2 cards. Lockets are not particularly great. 4 mana to draw 2 cards, all colored pips. Now you do get the option on which color of pips that you pay, but they are all colored pips. Hang on. Man, yeah, this is a bad idea. Yeah, a 3-mana rock. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of momentum on in Pauper. So I think Lockets themselves, not great. We'll give them 1.7, I guess. I mean, it does still make mana, can draw some cards. I see, no, there are better options. That the thing is that it does something useful. Those are useful things to do. The mana cost is a little high, and we have other cards that do similar effects better, and you use those instead. Next and last is Take Into Custody. It's a single blue mana for an instant. You tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This is all right. This is all right. Like your opponent's goes to their combat step, and you tap down their biggest creature, and it doesn't untap on their next turn. That's I think we'd give it a stun counter these days, just so it's a little cleaner that way. That we can tell when it's supposed to untap and when it's not. The stun counters also are nice, though, if you're in a proliferate deck, because you're able to proliferate those stun counters, which you wouldn't be able to do here. But still, 1 mana to take out a really scary creature for a couple turns is not awful. Not too terrible. But the question is an unsummon just better? And in some instances, yeah, it would be. But I think in others, this would be better. So I don't hate this. I don't hate it. I think we can give it... I mean, it's still... Imagine the decks that you play this in, and most of them will have probably better cards they could play to do similar kinds of effects. If you play the Cryogen Relic, yeah, that's 2 mana, but it's an artifact on the table, which can matter. You can sacrifice it later, and it draws you a card when it comes into the play, but you can also sacrifice it to put a stun counter on a creature, and then you draw another card because it leaves play. That is a card that, you put a little bit more mana into it, but it does so many more things for you over the course of a game, where this is, one get-out-of-jail-free card, one tempo change. It's a little scalpel, right? Like, it's a scalpel that can do a very specific thing, but it does that thing pretty darn well. I think you could give this a 3.5. And against my better judgment, I will do one bonus card, because I just can't stop myself. It is Abishan's Desire. It's a single blue mana for an enchantment aura, and enchants a creature. Enchanted creature has flying. Threshold, though, if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, enchanted creature has Shroud as well. So it can't be the target of spells or abilities. This seems pretty good. Like, I understand why this is not in Tolarian Terror decks, because you want instants and sorceries to go to your graveyard. You don't want to accidentally mill this, but imagine that you do have enough instants and sorceries in your graveyard, and then you have this in your hand. Your Terror gets flying and Shroud. I mean, I guess the Terror already has Ward 2, so you're feeling okay about that, but your Cryptic Serpent can get flying and Shroud. I could see putting this in the sideboard, maybe, of a Terror deck, just knowing if you're going up against a deck that has a lot of flyers, or maybe even a deck that has no flyers, so you know that you can swing over the top for some pretty big damage. I don't hate this. I don't hate it at all. I think it is actually perfectly playable in Pauper. You see where it could go, and that's that's something. That's something. It's also good art. Good art. Let's give this a 5.3. 5.3. I think this is absolutely playable in Pauper. That is all for today. We will catch you next time, where hopefully I am feeling better. Until then, we'll see you.